America. Welcome to the McCoy Show. Glad to have you with us. Good to be back after a little bit of a break for a couple weeks. But we got a good show for you today and looking forward to it. There's a lot that's been happening. Really picked an interesting time to take a little bit of a break from the show because all of the best news has been happening here in these last couple weeks, it seems. But I guess that's the way it always goes. There's so much to cover. It was hard narrowing down the topics that I wanted to talk about today because I like to talk. I like to give my opinion on just about everything in the world, and there's just so much going on. So we're just going to jump in and tackle as much of it as possible, and hopefully do it in under an hour. Where to begin? I mean, we've had. The Supreme Court, the Senate confirmation of Miss Jackson has been going on, and boy, has that been a circus sideshow. She can't even define what a female is, can't define where life begins, and yet she's got this incredible resume as a judge and is qualified. It's just the left is they've lost their minds. And the political cancer that progressive politics brings about is just amazing. And the way it rots the brain, the way it kills all intellectual advancement, it's so regressive. And that's something I wanted to talk about. Somebody wrote a good piece about how these so-called progressives are the furthest thing from progressive that you can imagine. They are regressive. Everything is moving backwards. Everything is less scientific. They claim a monopoly on science and scientific advancement. Everything is anti-science. They claim to be forward-thinking on societal progress and socioeconomics and all these things that make up our cultural and economic life in America, and it's all backwards. Everything they say is it's in reverse from what they claim. And, there's not a better testimony to that than a very qualified judicial mind like Miss Ketanji Jackson, and that she can't even define a woman. And we all know that, of course, she's smart enough to be able to define what a woman is. What the issue is she doesn't want to get in trouble with the wokeists out there, the progressive ideologues who will cancel and crucify anyone who dares to overstep the bounds of this horrifying political ideology that is known as progressive politics, which is mainstream Democrat politics today. I mean, there's no difference between the Democrat Party and the far left progressive ideology today. I mean, you've got people like Joe Manchin that are absolutely despised and hated every bit as much as a Trump Republican among the Democrat Party today. And I mean, how scary is that? I mean, that's unbelievable. Here's a guy, Manchin, a proud Democrat, been a Democrat his whole life, and has, he compares 1-to-1 with Nancy Pelosi on just about everything except a few issues where he tends to skew to the right. One of those, energy policy, because he comes from West Virginia, big coal mining state, and his constituents work in that industry, and he's got them in mind like any good representative, and so he's for producing our own energy, and for that sin in the progressive ideology world, he is just despised and hated because there is no room at all for having an individual opinion. It's all collectivist, and there's absolutely no room for it, and they can't stand for it. So they despise him and anybody who thinks for themselves. And that's the problem. And Joe Biden, who has never, in his whole worthless career as a senator, as a smiling face in the Senate, which is all he really brought to the Senate in 100,000 years of being there. He was never a progressive per se until he, got elected to the White House and had a lot of progressives to thank for being there. And now he has to fall in line, or he'll be the next on the chopping block. But he's doing a pretty good job of falling in line because he has no backbone at all. He won't stand up to them. He has put whoever they wanted in different cabinet positions in his administration. So he's got all the right people in place, and he's playing ball. So they love him. And meanwhile, we are, as a country, going down in flames. And that's exactly what they want. Let's see. Kyle Smith, writer for the New York Post, did a great job of doing a little write-up of where we are today with Democrat progressive ideology. And I just want to read that because it really puts it in perspective. Democrats now view everything in terms of who's being systematically oppressed. The reasonable view of racism is that there has always been racism in America. The woke translation is that America is defined by bigotry. From there, you get to, quote unquote, I have no idea how to distinguish a woman. In about 3 intellectual moves, trans people claim to be oppressed. They insist that a woman or man is whoever declares that status on any given day. And because oppression must be cosseted, acknowledged, and put at the forefront of every question, the Democrat Party nods enthusiastically or simply remains silent. Voters are bound to notice when a party is singing nothing but Looney Tunes. Don't call it a lunatic fringe. Lunacy is the heart, soul, and brain of the Democrat Party now. As essayist William Yale noted on Twitter, the existence of a controversy about the definition of a woman is, quote, something manufactured within the last 5 years and not through advancement of our scientific understanding. The Democrats brand Latinos with a term they hate, which is, of course, Latinx, which includes Latino and Latina. So they say Latinx, and Latinos actually hate that term. They cling to masks like Japanese soldiers still fighting World War II in 1957, and they teach sex ed in kindergarten. Forced masking for toddlers. Let property crimes go unanswered. Spend trillions of dollars to reduce inflation. Closing schools for a year is no big deal. Take illegal immigrants from the border and sprinkle them all over the country. Beg Saudis for fuel while stopping Americans from producing it. Everything the Democrats are saying at every level, from the trivial to the economy defining, is nuttier than an explosion at the Snickers factory. Retiring Democrat Stephanie Murphy of Florida, leaping off the party bus as it drives through a red light, off the overpass, and through the roof of the manure processing plant, says her party is being taken over by a faction that is trying to, quote, dismantle capitalism. I just wanted to bring that to you. It was humorous in parts, but boy, was that true. Kyle Smith at the New York Post wrote that. And man, that's where they're at. And the reason why they're not just sidelined as the lunatic fringe, as that piece said, is because they enjoy the protection of big media, big academia, big social media, entertainment, and Hollywood. All of these cultural pillars that we've discussed on this show before all prop this stuff up. And those are powerful allies to have in your corner. And so it doesn't matter how nutty and lunatic that you get when you've got the pillars, the biggest pillars of culture in your corner. That stuff's not going to go away anytime soon. And there's another, I found another, it's a kind of a write-up of where we're at with the things that the Biden administration has brought us. Just so we can kind of keep a check on a checklist on some of the things that have happened. Let's keep it all in perspective and see where we're at versus where we were with the Trump administration. We've gone from being the largest exporter of oil under Trump to unnecessarily dependent on Iran and other despotic regimes that use millions of dollars in U.S. blood money to fund terror proxies and other nefarious acts under President Joe Biden. Biden and his administration, of course, nixed the Keystone XL pipeline and hamstrung the U.S. fossil fuel industry with excessive regulations, bans on new drilling on federal lands, and other assaults on U.S. energy sector to purportedly protect the environment while buying dirty oil from murderous foreign dictators who don't give a hoot about climate change. Gas prices that were affordable under Trump's sensible energy policies have skyrocketed to an average of almost $4.50 per gallon nationwide, the highest in American history. I mean, just think about it. The highest in American history. It used to be that President Carter was thought of as the worst modern president who brought about the worst inflation and, of course, the oil and gas shortage of the 70s. People that are older remember the lines of traffic at every gas station, and there was fuel rationing and all that sort of thing. And we've surpassed all of that under Joe Biden. Inflation at a 40-year high. Of course, that harkens back to what I just said, the Carter administration. We're at the worst point since then with inflation. Supply chain bottlenecks are ongoing. I mean, we've heard about this for, 9 months ago. We were talking about supply chain bottlenecks. The big ships that were in limbo at the biggest import receiving centers around the U.S. And that stuff is still going on. It's unbelievable. It's hampered the U.S. economy. I mean, if you want a new car, a fridge, or a microwave, good luck. You'll wait weeks, if not months, to get it at inflated prices. World peace has regressed from a relative global stability under Trump, who gave us the destruction of the Islamic State's caliphate in Iraq and brokered a historic peace deal between Israel and the Middle East that was known as the Abraham Accords, to a foreign policy dumpster fire under the dangerously incompetent current administration. Russia, of course, has waged war against Ukraine in the most consequential European invasion since World War II and is committing genocide and war crimes before our eyes. Now add the massive humanitarian crisis underway as millions of Ukrainians have been forced to flee their homes to places unknown, while Vice President Kamala Harris giggled her way through a recent joint press conference with Polish President Duda in Warsaw, unable to answer a simple question regarding how many Ukrainian refugees the United States is willing to accept. Regressives, who formerly were called progressives, now insist we view everything through a prism of race. Forget judging others based on the content of one's character, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. taught us in 1963 during his soul-stirring I Have a Dream speech at our nation's capital. Thanks to the regressives, we're now being told to check our white privilege while innocent children are being indoctrinated with critical race theory in our public school system. China and Mexican cartels are manufacturing deadly fentanyl that's flowing across our nation's porous southern border, poisoning and killing our citizens. Illegal immigration has surged. Same with rising crime that's spreading like wildfire, including smash and grabs at grocery stores, shopping malls, and convenience stores near you. Our right to free speech is evaporating before our eyes thanks to a toxic stew of cancel culture, big tech censorship, and ever-growing internet surveillance. Let's not forget the personal liberties lost during the COVID-19 pandemic with the Biden administration's authoritarian vaccine mandates. Americans that chose not to get vaccinated have been fired from their jobs, discharged from serving in the U.S. military, kicked off college campuses, barred from playing sports, and denied entry to restaurants, among other harsh penalties, despite the inconvenient truth that the vaccines don't stop transmission of the virus. And we've talked about that on this show. Necessarily, the definition of a vaccine is something that stops a virus, and this one, these vaccines do not do that. And finally, we must not overlook the damage done to America's school kids by the Democratic Party, which, instead of doing what's in our children's best interest during the pandemic, opted to take marching orders from the far-left teachers' unions instead. Thanks to excessively prolonged remote learning and other extreme COVID-19 restrictions that lasted over 2 years, America's children have suffered significant learning and developmental setbacks, regressing academically, emotionally, and psychologically from New York to Los Angeles. And that was from a piece by Adriana Cohen, also New York Post writer, Democrats call themselves progressive, but practice regressive policies. And I wanted to start talking about all that because there's been some things that have happened lately that helps to sort of illustrate the picture a little better. Of course, we have the Hunter Biden ongoing scandal happening right now. We're going to get into some of that, but also there's been some other things like Clarence Thomas's wife, her text to Mark Meadows during the transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration. I don't know if you've heard about this thing. But apparently, Clarence Thomas' wife, Jenny, sent some texts to Mark Meadows during that whole fiasco, urging Meadows and other Republicans to keep fighting the good fight and to prevent the illicit takeover of the White House by the Biden regime, and to defend President Trump. And apparently, we're all suddenly finding out that if one sits on the Supreme Court, their spouse forfeits all right to public discourse and free speech. I didn't know that. Did you? Apparently, it's in the Constitution somewhere. Nobody can point to where, but it's in there. Just trust them. It's in there. If someone, only if they're a conservative, actually, does that count? Now, that's in there too, actually. That if a conservative judge sits on the Supreme Court, their spouse forfeits all right to free speech and all that stuff. So that's why that Clarence Thomas now is being called to be impeached from the Supreme Court and even murdered by many on Twitter. You don't have to look very far to find that. They're actually calling for his head on a platter. This is a black Supreme Court justice, and the proud Democrats out there are calling for his death, a modern lynching, if you will. But they're the party of racial progress. Don't forget that. So modern lynchings from the Democrat Party of today. Of course, they are the woke and racially progressive ones, and we are all just a bunch of racists. So there you have it. You should, I'm not going to get into all the back and forth on that, but you should just go to Twitter, if nothing else, that cesspool, and read some of these things that people have said. And I'm not just talking about your run of the mill, this guy or that guy on Twitter. I'm talking about the blue check army, the people with big followings, the journalists, the people who talk for a living. The ones that are known, unlike myself. The big ones out there on the left who are calling for Clarence Thomas's head because of what his wife said and thought during the transition of the administrations. Now, if that had any bearing on things that happened, if she was able to pull some kind of power strings and actually invoke some I don't know, apparatus of power that forced something to happen where the transition didn't take place and Trump was to remain in office, that would be one thing. But she was just venting, and that's all, and nothing became of it. We still had Biden take over, and it was an illegitimate election. We all know that. Everybody knows. Even people on the left know that. They're never going to admit it. Nobody's going to admit it. You really can't. There is no solution prescribed in the Constitution for what we have. It's gotten so far off the rails. Our founders couldn't even envision something like this. So there's nothing anybody can really do about it except get it right the next time. Hopefully put some plug these holes in the sinking ship, and hopefully get it right next time is all we can really do at this point. Oh, man, it is just insane out there. What else do we got? Let's see. Well, okay, so that kind of, okay. The Clarence Thomas thing, guilt by association is basically what they're claiming there, okay? And we're just talking about some text that Clarence Thomas's wife sent to somebody. Therefore, Thomas's, I don't know what they're claiming he's guilty of, but he needs to be impeached at best and hanged for treason at worst, because of some guilt by association thing. Well, what about Hunter Biden? Because more is coming out about this. And his dad, the president of the United States, is more than guilty by association. He's guilty by direct implication at this point. He's the big guy that, if you followed this thing at all, Hunter has referenced the big guy with the massive paychecks that have flowed from Ukraine and China and Russia and everywhere else around the world into Hunter Biden's bank account. And big cuts of that go to the big guy, who is, of course, Joe Biden himself. And this is all stuff that happened when Biden was vice president for 8 years with Barack Obama. And who knows, beyond that, when and how and where and whatever, how this all happened. But the laptop is real. We all know that. Even the New York Times admitted that. And what is so unbelievable about this is, I don't know if you remember, but the New York Post actually broke this story before the 2020 election. They said, hey, there's this laptop that was left in a shop in Delaware, and it's Hunter Biden's laptop, and all these incriminating things are on it, and we need to really take a look at this thing. The White House, not the White House at that point, but the Democrat, the leftist establishment came out and said it was all a bunch of hogwash. It was all Russian disinformation. Twitter took their marching orders from that and Facebook and shut down the New York Post actual account on social media. Shut them down. A major newspaper in this country canceled their free speech and their journalistic reporting ability to bring stories to the public from marching orders from the political establishment. I mean, that becomes a First Amendment issue. I know that, you get into the whole libertarian verse, where libertarians and conservatives diverge on this question about free speech. Can Twitter and the rest of them shut down somebody if they don't like what they're saying? And conservatives like to claim that's a First Amendment violation. Libertarians say, no, wait, it's a private company. They can do it as they wish. First Amendment only applies to government. And I agree with that take on it. However, when you have this extreme collusion with big tech and the social media companies with government, and they take their marching orders from government, they become a single entity. And that's what we have now. And that's even been admitted by the White House. Jen Psaki's even admitted to telling Twitter and Facebook what to edit out and what to cancel and what to block. They have people that coordinate this stuff. I mean, that right there, that's collusion. That they become one entity at that point. And so shutting down someone's speech on Twitter or Facebook does amount, in my opinion, at this point, under this current administration, to a free speech First Amendment violation. And that's something we really need to look at. And we really need some Republicans on Capitol Hill with some serious backbone to get involved in some of these investigations. But I'm all over the place on this. Hunter Biden, I mean, man, all of the things that have come out have just painted the Biden family as beyond anything dirty we ever even imagined. And I don't even have time to get into all the pieces of this dirty, disgusting, filthy puzzle. I implore you to go out there and look it up and just read all of the things out there about what this laptop has divulged about how all of these crooked scandals took place. But, by admission of the laptop being real, it does pose legitimate questions that need to be answered at this point. Because before, of course, they shut it all down. Oh, it's just Russian disinformation. So it could easily be dismissed and everybody could go about their separate ways. Now they're admitting it's real. Well, if it's real, then we have a corrupt president. And we all knew he was corrupt. But I'm saying this is evidence on a level that we haven't had before. That I don't care how big of a leftist you are, you can't deny it anymore. If the laptop is legit, so are the scandals that the laptop exposed. So, I mean, how can you deny that? I mean, you go back to Joe Biden when he was vice president, threatening to have the Ukrainian prosecutor fired. Ukraine wouldn't get the $1 billion. Remember that quote? And he was proud of it. They wouldn't get the $1 billion unless they fired the prosecutor that was investigating Burisma and his son's involvement. And he said, son of a bitch, they did. They fired him. I mean, that was a quote Joe Biden said. They got him to fire the prosecutor that was threatening his son's pocketbook. I mean, this is corrupt. So can you imagine if Donald Trump Jr. was involved in some stuff like this, how they would be melting down across the media right now? And you barely hear a peep outside of conservative journalism and news sources. It's just unbelievable. It's so dirty. I mean, we haven't seen anything dirty. This makes Watergate look like family fun day at the park. I mean, Watergate is nothing compared to how dirty this stuff is. And you look at how dirty of a person Hunter Biden is with all the salacious details that the laptop revealed about him, his crack smoking and everything else. I'm not even going to get into it. I'm going to need a bath if I even talk about that stuff. What a horrible person. What a horrible family. So anyway, the Federalist has 8 questions that the Biden administration, that Joe Biden needs to answer. I mean, anybody would ask these things. We need to find out about pay to play in Ukraine, which we have all the evidence for. It's all there. We need answers. China getting involved. We have China investing money in Hunter Biden's firm to buy up property and other things in the U.S. And I mean, it just goes on and on. Moscow, Kazakhstan, and others all involved in Hunter Biden's dirty business dealings. We need answers. Joe Biden was involved in the payoff and all that too. He's the big guy, remember? Ukraine's firing, I just mentioned it, the firing of the prosecutor that was investigating all this stuff. We need answers about that. The Obama and Biden administrations ignoring conflicts of interest. And, man, there's so many of those, you can't even name them all. The intelligence community's briefing of Biden. What did he know? When did he know it? We deserve answers. The possible collusion to interfere in the 2020 election. Remember the 50 former intelligence officials? Yeah, who are they? We've never even had one of them even named. I mean, they said they were former heads of the CIA. We know who all those guys are, but I mean, they haven't come out and admitted it or said anything. You know, nobody's asked these guys. Who are the 50 former intelligence officials who said it was all Russian disinformation when the Hunter Biden laptop story first emerged? It's all Russian disinformation. I'm a former intelligence official. I know what I'm talking about. Apparently you don't. You're just another politico from the left running interference for the Bidens and for the left. So who are these 50 guys? We need to know. We need answers because it's all BS. And polls have come out now showing that people would not have voted for Joe Biden had this story not been suppressed by the media. Well, that is huge. And I'm not talking about a little bit. It's like 45% of people that were polled said no, that would have definitely impacted my vote had I known more about that story. Had I known it was legitimate and not just Russian disinformation, as I was told, I would have voted differently. 45% of people that were polled. That's crazy. I mean, right there, that alone is a huge scandal. Oh, man, where does it ever end? What else? You probably haven't heard of this guy, Roland G. Fryer. This is a Harvard guy, an academic, professional academic. He's written a lot of papers. He's an economist. Just has a ton of accolades and awards and grants to his name. He's written for tons of peer-reviewed journals. Anyway, academic, Harvard guy, right? He's a black man, very educated, very accomplished in his career. And we know, from things that in the news all the time that higher academia is a cesspool of secular progressive filth. But every now and then a wide-eyed academic comes along, afflicted with an incurable case of intellectual curiosity and not just a desire to devote his mind and toil over to the woke orthodoxy and victimization ideology. And that's where Mr. Fryer comes in. He's done tons of work on socioeconomics among the black community versus the white community and different factors involved in what contributes to poverty and educational achievement gaps between the different races and whatnot. And this is a guy who wants to, he wants to discover the truth. He's looking for truth. as anyone with intellectual curiosity is wont to do. And his conclusions have showed him that unlike the wokesters out there who claim that everything is due to bigotry and racism embedded in the culture of America, that black children can achieve just as much as white children given the same set of socioeconomic circumstances. And I mean, that's to me or you, that doesn't sound like a groundbreaking idea. But to the ivory halls of the Harvard wokesters, that is grounds for ultimate cancellation. And they are really going after this guy. He's a tenured professor of economics at Harvard. I mean, this is an anointed member of the elite by most standards, and yet he's come to the wrong conclusions. He's guilty of wrongthink. Let's see. And Mr. Professor Fryer's research, some of his conclusions have led him to observations that were a bit unsettling to the higher education wokesters out there. For example, he found that the academic achievement gap accelerates between kindergarten and 8th grade. And then he found that controlling for a few variables, the initial disparity disappeared. And from some of his research, it says black kindergartners and white kindergartners with similar socioeconomic backgrounds achieved at similar levels. Adjusting the data for the effects of socioeconomic status reduces the estimated racial gaps in test scores by more than 40% in math and more than 66% in reading. And see, the left doesn't know what to do with information like that because they have to have a steady stream of victims to stay in power. And anything that challenges the progressive victimization culture challenges their power, because without that, they have no power. The only way the left stays in power is being propped up by the cultural pillars that we've always talked about and by fear of their voter base, that someone's out to get them and that they are a victim and they can do nothing about it except keep voting for the left, and they're going to protect them. And they're going to do all their thinking for them. They're going to fight all their battles for them because they're too stupid and poor and ignorant to fight their own battles. And people are starting to wake up to this. It's taking a long time. But there are people that are brokering an honesty like Professor Fryer at Harvard, who is in no way, shape, or form a conservative or someone of the right. I'm sure his politics would align much closer to a typical liberal professor. But he's out there searching for truth, and the conclusions that he's coming to fly in the face of the today's progressive ideology. And they are just squirming in their seats because this is a respected guy. And for him to go out there and kind of pull back the curtain is not a good thing for them. And let's see, some more of his research talks about the number of books in a child's household also makes an appreciable difference. On average, black students in the sample had 39 children's books in their home, compared with an average of 93 books among white students. Adjusting for that completely, quote, eliminates the gap in reading as children progress through first grade. These findings contradicted the standard view that black children are already locked into academic last place before they even reach school. Now, isn't that a shame that's the standing that the left puts on black America right there? You're already a victim. There's nothing you can do about it. From day one, from the word go, you are a victim. Somebody you don't know did something to you you're not aware of, and therefore you can't achieve and you can't do what the other guy can do. And I mean, that is just so racist and insulting. It's unbelievable. I'm so sick to death of the left claiming a monopoly on anti-racism and on racial harmony, which is they are the purveyors of racial injustice and racism today. It's disgusting because we, of course, believe, children, the color doesn't determine intellectual ability, skin color. God created all of us in his image, no matter the color. It's ridiculous to think otherwise. And this guy I really respect Dr. Fryer, Professor Fryer here, because he's doing the real research and coming up with these real conclusions. It's something that simple. Children's books in the home for little first graders. You know, the average black home, 39 books, average white home, 93 books. If you equal that out, you know, put a few more children's books in the home of the black children, guess what? They come out at the same of the reading level as their white counterparts. I mean, that's huge. And we had no reason to think otherwise, but to the left, hey, they're victims. They can never achieve to the level of the white children. And that's just BS. And we know it. And I'm glad this guy is actually, you know, revealing this to people. And I'm reading kind of from an article here. A good friend of his wrote in his defense, because Harvard, I hadn't gotten really to the meat of it yet, but Harvard's kind of going after this guy because he's revealing a little too much, and that is such a shame. It used to be that the institutions of higher learning were devoted to a lifetime quest for education and knowledge, and that's just not the case anymore. They're just another political structure out there in the ocean of leftist filth. What they're saying, the guy his friend that wrote this article or colleague says that it's good news what he's discovering. It also means the problem is not as intractable as it seemed, or rather, it would have been good news to anyone who wants the racial disparity to disappear through interventions that are known to work. But it was terrible news to activists who are invested in the idea that systemic racism explains everything. Socioeconomic standing and household reading, after all, can be improved. So Fryer also looked at police brutality and shootings, and did some good research on that. And he did find that confrontations between blacks and police did result in some form of force. Interactions with police were more common with black folks. And I'm not talking about deadly force. I'm talking about, you know, police force in his research. But as far as shootings are concerned, he could find no racial differences in either the raw data or when contextual factors are taken into account, which flat out contradicts the Black Lives Matter assertion that has been uncritically embraced by the academy, the press, and numerous politicians who hold that police readily resort to deadly violence in dealing with blacks. And this professor has found that simply not to be the case, that, you know, police shoot the guy who's threatening their lives. And in some cases, wrongly kill someone, like we found Chauvin and up there in Minneapolis, and he's in prison now. So, you know, there you have it. Let's see. Professor Fryer's paper on this, An Empirical Analysis of Racial Differences in Police Use of Force, was written in 2016 and published in final form in 2019 in the Journal of Political Economy, well before George Floyd's death ignited riots and frenzied affirmation in academia that police are the agents of brutal, racially motivated oppression. From this, one might conclude that Professor Fryer had learned how successfully to kick over the traces of the liberal academic establishment. He was by no definition a conservative, but a kind of independent contrarian who was willing to go wherever the evidence took him. And for a while, it appeared to have taken him to the heights of academic achievement. His work received a lot of criticism in places like the New York Times, but also won substantial funding for his Education Innovation Laboratory at Harvard. And then the bottom fell out. So what happened was he was accused in 2018 of engaging in unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature towards 4 women who worked in the Harvard-affiliated research lab. Now, at that time, those allegations kind of fell by the wayside because it turned out there wasn't much to them. And this guy kind of mentions what it was, that someone took something he said the wrong way, thought that he was flirting with them. Somebody else said that they didn't like his language, and it wasn't, I can't find that part. I'm looking through this article. It wasn't that he used foul language. They didn't like his style of language. Here it is. Had found some of his language annoying, whatever that means. Didn't like the way he said a certain word or something. Anyway, those claims someone mistaking his actions for a flirtatious sort of engagement, and then finding some of his language annoying. When Harvard decided this guy was peeling back the curtain a bit too far and threatening the woke ideology, suddenly these charges are kind of regurgitated and made to sound like something really, really bad. And so he's kind of on the outs right now, which is all because of the research that he's been devoting himself to that doesn't hold up the leftist ideology. And they just don't like that. And so they're going to go after him. This is just more cancel culture. He, of course, as a tenured professor, can't easily be fired, but they are certainly trying to attack him in other ways. So I just brought all that to your attention just because I found it as an interesting little story that, again, shows that, similar to the Clarence Thomas thing, the left are not the purveyors of racial justice that they claim to be at all. It is all about ideology, and they will say and use anybody and anything they can to get their way and to get more power. They have no standards, and I'm talking about progressives, not classic liberals. I'm talking about the secular progressives of today. This horrible ideology that is so pervasive in absolutely everything. So anyway, let's see. Let's slide over to Ukraine for a minute. We're seeing something I didn't think I'd ever see. It's this jingoism on the left, this need to go to war mentality we haven't seen since George W. Bush days after 9/11 on the right. And it's getting crazy out there how bad they want a war with Putin and with Russia. And anyone that says, well, hold on a minute, let's take a look at this and see if this is really what we want to do. You're an agent of Putin. You're a Putin apologist. You're a Russian asset and blah, blah, blah. I mean, anybody that's not like gung-ho, boots on the ground, let's start nuking Moscow tomorrow, is an agent of Russia. They're working for Putin. They're defending the Putin regime and all this stuff. And this is coming from the left. I mean, what happened to the left? They used to be anti-war and peace and love and make love, not bombs, all that. Man, what a complete shift. They want a war so bad they can't stand it, and because Ukraine is such a noble endeavor. And we're finding out more and more every day about how just incredibly corrupt that country is. Now, I mean, it doesn't justify what Russia's doing. I don't even know the sausage making of all this behind the scenes politics. There is some bad blood that runs really deep between Ukraine and Russia and Putin and the leaders in Ukraine and back and forth. And we could never understand it here in the West, how deep all that goes. Nobody is fully in the right. Nobody's fully in the wrong. Everybody's involved and dirty and corrupt. And the people that are victimized is always the citizens. The people of Ukraine have suffered dearly. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. The refugees, the children you see crying, missing their homes and schools and being dragged away and having to go to other countries. And, that stuff's terrible. And the people are really, really suffering there. And you don't have to really take a political position on the issue to see that with your own eyes, the people who are really suffering because of this. But when you get into the policy madness and the reasons for the invasion and the back and forth between Ukraine and Russia, we are best to just stay out of it because it's an ugly mess. And it is not black and white. Putting a Ukraine flag on your Twitter profile and saying, I stand with Ukraine. I mean, you're not accomplishing anything but stroking your own ego. I'm just so sick of the virtue signaling out there. The people who want your children to go die in some foreign war for somebody else. And they wouldn't lift a finger to do it themselves. We know that. And they hold up Zelensky as like he's some kind of saint. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know the guy. I like some of the speeches he's given. He's a charismatic guy. I feel sorry for his people. Like I said, that's where I'm at with it. I'm not going to get involved beyond that. But I know that he's begging for resources. He's begging for a foreign legion. So why don't these people sign up and go fight if they believe in it so strongly? Put your money where your mouth is. He's already said, I'll give you the guns, the equipment, whatever, come fight for me. And a lot of people have done it all over the world. There's quite an extensive foreign legion in Ukraine right now, being killed for Zelensky's country and for this war. And all I know is that World War III is on the brink, and our president is at the helm. And man, that scares me to death. To have Joe Biden, I mean, of all the times in history, to put Joe Biden in the White House, look what's going on right now, to have him in charge of this, it just scares the mess out of me. I don't even know what to do. I just know that he's going to fumble. I mean, every day it's something else. White House trying to do damage control right now over some off-the-cuff remark he made about regime change with regard to Putin, and they're trying to walk that back. Oh, he didn't really mean that. Biden, I mean, the guy is a walking disaster. We can't get to an election fast enough. We've got to put some different people in charge because, I mean, it is hell in a handbasket time right now. Democrats, I mean, how the Democrat Party is just off the deep end. I'm looking at a picture of this energy Biden's appointment. The guy who's like got the I don't even know, the weird bald-headed guy or whatever he calls it. I don't know what his pronouns are. I don't care. But I mean, that is such that image right there that's your Democrat Party today. There's an article where they're talking about the Brookings Institute, who's a left-wing group. But the Isabel Sawhill of that group is kind of trying to explain the slide of white working class voters away from the Democrat Party. And she says, this large group includes some people who are just plain prejudiced, but a larger group that simply resents all the attention paid to race, gender, sexual preference, or identity, and the disrespect they think this entails for those with more traditional views and lifestyles. And what she's talking about is a white working class, Americans that have drifted from the Democrat Party. And she could have just as easily been talking about literally any group of voters and just could have as easily said, as Democrats become more weird and gross, they predictably become less popular. And when she says all the attention, she means the absolute obsession with racial equity, toxic masculinity, and transgenderism. And I mean, everything is about sex and racism with no regard paid to the real issues that are affecting all of us. The Democrats are expected to lose control of the House and possibly the Senate, and that's no big surprise. They've become a complete disaster the way they're trying to run the country. They've allowed violent crime to surge. The prices on everything have gone up. They refuse to do anything about the catastrophe at the southern border. And like I mentioned before, we're at the brink of World War III. And it's just all race, gender, and sexual identity all the time. Inflation, what's that? Crime, don't talk to me, what's crime? Not a problem. Afghanistan, Ukraine, and wait a minute, and they're just worried about what Ron DeSantis is doing down there with the "Don't Say Gay" bill. I mean, have you heard about that? I don't even feel like getting into all that. He's trying to protect little, 3, 4, 5-year-olds from being taught sex education when they don't even know what that is. And passed a great bill that was very highly supported by Democrat and Republican parents across Florida. They don't want their little first graders being subjected to sex education. And he passed a bill saying you can't talk about sex education to first graders. And that right there lit the left on fire. And they're calling it the "Don't Say Gay" bill because I guess to them that has a good ring to it. And they've bought billboards in Florida, and you've got celebrities all over the place saying "gay, gay, 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 gay," like they're getting some kind of, I don't know. Nowhere in the bill does it say anything about not saying the word gay. Somebody came up with this and they run with it because they're collectivists. They can't think for themselves. Somebody says something, they're like a bunch of lemmings. They all think it, they all say the same things. Let's see. Democrats have taken the seriousness out of everything with their preoccupation with pronouns, diversity, and gender identity. Mr. President, we might have to shoot down some Russian aircraft, which would sharply escalate our role in the Ukraine conflict. Okay, let's decide who gets to pull the trigger. Bring me the names of some non-binary queers, throw in some women X of color and a few Latinx. I mean, this is barely even hyperbole. One of the Biden administration's high-ranking officials at the Energy Department is a, quote, non-binary drag queen with a public, quote, dog roll fetish, whatever the hell that is. Biden's Supreme Court nominee this week declined to define the word woman. And his ambassador to the United Nations declared last year that the original sin of slavery weaved white supremacy into our founding documents and principles. It's all ridiculous, all race and sex, all the time. It's not extreme, it's weird, and it's gross, and it's the Democrat Party. And that was a piece I kind of borrowed from a piece by Eddie Scarry, who's a columnist at the Federalist, and he nailed it, because that's where they're at today. It's like, I mean, you can't even parody the left anymore. They're beyond parody. That's why the Babylon Bee, you don't hear much from them anymore, because everything they've ever said has come true and gotten even worse. It's even worse than they've ever said. So, man, the decline of Western culture. And here at the Ben McCoy Show, we'll be here to document it every step of the way. Well, that's all the time we have tonight, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Glad that you joined us tonight. That was fun. Hope to see you next time. And thanks again for tuning into the Ben McCoy Show. God bless.